Separation of powers, legislative supremacy, and judicial restraint in taxation. In this question, we are going to demonstrate about the boundary between the legislative and the judiciary body in order for us to have an exact understanding about the black and white border of the two. Question number 10. A major advocacy group, Tax Watch Philippines, challenges the new enacted digital services. Okay, and they have two grounds of this. So they're challenging that in the Supreme Court. Their petition asserts two distinct grounds. First, the ground is the tax rate of 12% on digital transaction is arbitrary. That's according to them, to their contention, and excessively burdensome, arguing it will destroy the nascent e-commerce. Those have some future or like potential e-commerce industry, thereby questioning the wisdom of policy of the amount of the rate. So that's the first. Second is ground 2. The Bureau or the BIR is misapplying the tax by subjecting specific cross-border transactions. So they're questioning the BIR. So this is the application or the interpretation that the Congress did not clearly intend. The Congress did not clearly intend. So there is a what we call this one ambiguity when it comes to the interpretation of the law, thereby creating ambiguity in the subject of the tax, blurring the tax designated situs of taxation. Now, based on the described or in the established doctrine of separation of powers in tax legislation, what is the most probable outcome? So ano kaya yung magiging decision ng Supreme Court with regard to the two grounds? A. The Supreme Court will likely rule on both grounds by reducing the tax rate to the reasonable 5%, issuing final interpretation to correct the BIR's misapplication, as its judicial power extends to both wisdom and application. Well, the second one is valid because the BIR has or can, the judiciary body, the Supreme Court, can interfere only the application of the tax and the interpretation of the law, of the tax law. But it cannot interfere the wisdom because it is political in nature. Political, meaning that is within their minds of the legislative body and on their perspective, the way they see it fit for the purpose. So therefore, this is not covered on the scope of the Supreme Court. Letter B, Supreme Court will dismiss the challenge to ground 1 because it is a political question, which is right. This is a political question, so it is out of bounds on the part of the Supreme Court and cannot inquire into the wisdom and policy of the legislature. Wisdom and policy cannot inquire. So that's true. But A may proceed to address the ground 2, which falls under the duty of interpretation of law, which is correct. So therefore, this is acceptable. So those are the reasons why it is being acceptable, the choice letter B. Letter C, the Supreme Court will only rule a ground 1 because questioning the amount of rate is primary check of the legislature. No, cannot be done. So again, that's a political question and it cannot be done like that way. While ground 2 must be dismissed as determination situs is exclusively of the administrative BIR. No, the situs or the place of taxation is again the legislative. It's the legislative jurisdiction determination that if there is some vague as to the situs, then interpretation, the judiciary can do the interpretation if vague. Letter D, both grounds will be dismissed as the power to taxation is plenary. Yeah, plenary in the sense that it's only on the legislative extent we're talking about, and the courts are expressly prevented from questioning aspect of the tax, including the wisdom. Yes, the situs. Yes, the subject of the tax, as long as the tax is for the public purpose. Yes, that's correct. But again, not the ground 2. Not the ground 2. Because the ground 2, pagdating sa interpretation, dyan pwedeng pumasok na yung judiciary body. Okay? Pwede siyang pumasok pagdating sa interpretation at saka doon sa application. And the validity of the law can also be determined if it's beyond the constitutional limitations, and also if it is not for public purpose. That's another way of interfering. One way that they can acquire the jurisdiction over the case. So therefore, the answer is letter C. Now, not sure if I have additional. I think none. So again, just to reiterate what I've said earlier, just to repeat, fixing of the amount of the rate and determination of the wisdom or policy are matters that fall squarely within the plenary scope of legislative taxing power, at hindi yan pwede magiging part of that judiciary body. Accordingly, yung judiciary body cannot be a co-legislator. Hindi siya pwedeng maging co-legislator yung judiciary body. Cannot be. Okay. Now, the second ground, the authority of the court. As I said, the court can acquire only jurisdiction when it comes to the interpretation of the law, which has ambiguity as to its implementation, and also the application of the law, that it does not violates the due process. Okay, that's part of that, and other constitutional limitations and inherent limitations. The authority of the courts is confined into the legal scope of tax matters, like the application again. So in here, since there is ambiguity as to the situs of taxation, so challenging the BIR's interpretation, the group is asking the court to perform its core judicial function. So to construe the meaning of the statute, and therefore the court has a jurisdiction over that. Therefore, the Supreme Court is within the limited but critical power to address the ground 2. So I hope that you get my explanation.